Hi there and welcome to Celebrity Synastry, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard Part 2. I was going to complete this the other night and I ended up muting the rest of the video. So I cut that off and came back for Part 2. If you don't want to go back and watch Part 1, that's okay. I'm going to recap a little bit here. I got my thoughts together a little bit better. For some reason, I'm lagging really bad, but most of this will be, my voice and the browser here. So you won't need to see me so much. Let me go ahead and flip it over to the browser now. See, this is what we'll primarily be looking at, but I do want to say that this is all speculation. We are looking at what went on between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard in regards to the synastry in astrology. So first of all, we went over their sun compatibility, and Amber's a Taurus and Johnny's a Gemini, so their suns are not compatible. They're not in the same polarity. And their moons are also not, let me go over here. Their moons are also not compatible, which I was saying that moon compatibility leads to, lifelong partnership or soulmate partnership. So, or even twin flame. So those are the relationships that can last, a lifetime, longer than 10 or 20 years. So when we see that Amber's moon is in Libra and Johnny's is in Capricorn, this already gave them about a 10 to 20 year span at maximum without looking at the other aspects that were interplaying with them. So then we looked at sun-moon compatibility, and with this we can see, about a 4 or 5 year relationship lifespan, and they do have that going on. So we confirmed that they, most likely have a 4 to 5 year lifespan of a relationship, right, in their sun-moon contacts. And we also confirmed that they probably wouldn't last more than 10, 20 years maximum. But then we went and we looked and we could see that, I'm going to go over back to this one. We went and we started looking at the aspects. Now, I had rambled on a little bit about something and I couldn't quite remember it the other day, but we're going to get into it in a moment. So we went and looked through their aspects here, and we can see, Sun trine Mars. Amber's Sun is, I like going this way with Johnny first. But Amber's Sun is trine his Mars, so this brings, physical compatibility, attraction, physical attraction. And then we could see that, his Mercury is conjunct his own Venus. Now I want to go over to his birth chart really quick. And this is what I wanted to elaborate on a little bit, that I got a little sidetracked on the first video. So this is Johnny's birth chart. We don't have Amber's birth time, so we only have Johnny's houses here. So we can see how her planets interlaid into his houses and affected him a little bit more than with her. But I do feel that the aspects can tell us a lot as well. So let's go back into this. So here we see that in his 10th house, which is your house of career and public relations, things like that, Johnny has his Venus conjunct Mercury. This is his love language. Venus and Mercury is our actual speaking, thinking, writing, our mind. So to have these two together in his 10th house is why he's able to really, come off beautifully to the masses. Now, as much as some people may or may not like Amber Heard because of this whole thing with Johnny or vice versa, her Venus sits right here in Taurus, right next to his Mercury, in a very tight orb to his Venus as well. So she definitely was very complimentary to him, and as I mentioned in the last video, Venus is the wife in a man's chart, so she automatically looked like wife to him, and he appeared and she, like I had said, even though she may not be the traditional wife, had felt like playing the wife for him. Don't worry about this lagging with my video. You don't really need to see me, but I'm going to hook up my real camera next time. I just wanted to get this out to you since it got cut off the other night. So there was something I had gone into after the video got muted that we'll get into in a second, but another important thing here with her Venus being right next to Johnny's is that I had said in the last video that her Venus is square his Saturn, and this is very important between them, but also I had wanted to note and kind of lost it that his Venus is square his Saturn as well, because his Venus sits right with her Venus. So like if we overlaid her chart into his houses here, This is just to see that it's the 10th house, so it was very public and very visible. So I thought I'd make this a little more entertaining. I want to show you what this Venus conjunction looks like between them by playing you the trailer to the Rum Diaries, the film that they were in together. This is, you know, very, them being in a film together is Venus conjunct Venus, especially in Johnny's 10th house. So I'm going to play the trailer for you just to spice it up a little bit here. Here we go.
Strangest paradise on earth. Hey, you made it. But you said you had a TV. The guy across the alley has a TV. I have binoculars. That's where your secrets come to dance. Don't notice the wig. Whoa. And the voodoo works its magic. And if the drinking doesn't get you into trouble,
how does anybody drink 161 miniatures?
Are they not complimentary? The women definitely will. I thought maybe you were a mermaid.
I'm from Connecticut.
Stay away from her. She's Sanderson's fiancée. She sunbathes in the nude. She's a sweet little beauty. I was looking at his boat.
We've all been down on her. It's a wonderful experience.
Now all this might sound like some crazed hallucination, but it's all true. I think. This place is a sea of money, Paul. And there's people like me who know how to get it out. Isn't that kind of thing illegal?
That's an inappropriate comment.
We've nailed this bastard to his own front door. I got a story for you. I'm going after him. Are you out of your mind?
I'll bet you scream before I do.
No such thing as 470 proof alcohol.
What we do is private.
Front seat's gone.
I've got a brilliant idea.
Try and look normal.
Okay, so I probably, I don't know if you guys could hear that, but I probably, I should have chosen the video where, it was like all their romantic scenes together, but I thought there would be more of her in that one, but you can see sort of, it's very Venusian. It's all about money and romance, and, you know, Venus is about romance. Even when she touches his leg, that is very much, you know, Venus, earthy energy, sensual touch. But I also saw, you know, the wild side of it is very much Mars square Jupiter. So we touched on that in the first video. When a couple has Mars square Jupiter, you can go back to the first video, or you can go back to my Are You Wasting Your Time video. But you can see, when they have this, it basically means that usually it's about a 2 to 4 month fling, and then it kind of feels like you met the one and then it falls apart. Sometimes it can play out over many years where the two come together, but they can't figure out why they can't really get on the same page. Now, it sounds very mild, but it causes great heartbreak and disruption, especially depending on what the other aspects are that the two are missing out on, because usually Mars square Jupiter overpowers any other romantic aspects that would have kept a couple together otherwise. So like that sun-moon conjunction or trining that they have going on that can keep a couple together for 4 or 5 years, Mars square Jupiter will overpower that. So as I had touched on in the first video, I think the only thing that kept them together was this Venus conjunct Venus in Taurus, which is ruled by Venus, a very powerful conjunction for them. Oops, won't go down. And so I had said, and this is where I want to go back into Johnny's birth chart really quick. So I'll show you in this chart really quickly to give you a visual first. See, here's her Venus sitting with his Venus and Mercury in Taurus. Now when we overlay this into his birth chart, we can see that her Venus would be sitting right here. Her sun's actually over here, even closer to his midheaven. So she did bring him more fame. And as I had touched on when I clicked out, I'll just touch on this really quick. The reason that she brought him infamy, if you've been watching the scroller at all, is because his Lilith is in opposition to her Venus. And even his own Venus, but even more directly to her Venus. And so, you know, this IC with his Neptune here, it means Neptune in the 4th house on the IC means that either Johnny had a very he had a very work-oriented childhood. He may have had things happen that he doesn't even remember. He may have had, there could have been drugs and alcohol abuse involved in his family, but if not, his family could have been very spiritual, or there could just have been a lot of like actual spirituality, like witches, astrology, things like that. But Neptune is just very, it's either going to, on the lower vibration, cause, you know, maybe an addict parent. In this 10th, 4th house deals with the father and mother. So, or it could just be his parents were very out there, eccentric, interesting. It is falling in Scorpio. So there could have been some mysteries around money, finances, death. There could have been unknowns there. There's a lot of different ways Neptune in the 4th house can play out, especially with being in Scorpio. But it does make that Johnny had a very interesting childhood, and he may possibly, because Neptune is a fog, he may or may not remember some of that, or it could be a little mixed up to him. Or he could remember it all very clearly, but it was very interesting, which would create, you know, kind of cultivate this interesting these interesting characters that he plays. A lot of them he could probably draw upon from his childhood, from his family, from his home, more than he probably speaks about, because Scorpio is also hidden, you know, 8th house stuff. And so he's got his 10th house Taurus here. He just kind of manifests this in a very, you know, in the arts, in a very physical way. And actually Scorpios make very good physical actors as well. Anyway, but okay. So with his Lilith here in opposition to her Venus, because if remember, her Venus would be right here on in his 10th house, his house of career and public relations. Venus, you know, in a man's chart doesn't do so much. Usually Venus on the 10th house can bring fame to a man or infamy. It's sort of like a love-hate thing, you know, like Taylor Swift has Lilith on the 10th, and people either really love to bash on her or they just adore her and worship her. And then you see with like sex symbols, Venus will be on a woman's ascendant, because the ascendant and the midheaven are the most visible parts of the chart. So with, you know, with Lilith in the 4th for Johnny, you know, this in Scorpio, Neptune could just really cultivate a very possibly sexual side of him, or a deep mysterious side of him, even possibly a spiritual side, even though I don't feel that he talks too much about anything like that. But with his Lilith directly in opposition to her Venus is my point of what I'm trying to say. She brought infamy into his life, where he had a good reputation here in the 10th house, with mostly just his Venus and Mercury being illuminated, and then, you know, his sun in Gemini in the 11th. The 11th is traditionally ruled by Aquarius, bringing him good public relations. You know, that's also a fame spot, but also his ascendant being in Leo. You know, a midheaven or an ascendant in Leo, even 7th house or Aquarius, which, you know, it's that there, definitely brings fame. You know, you'll see that in a majority of famous people's charts, that their midheaven or their ascendant is in Leo. So I'm just going to go back into, I like this little screen right here today. But what I want to get to here that I got sidetracked from the other day when we did the first part of this video is that Johnny's Venus is natally square his Saturn here in Aquarius, from Taurus to Aquarius, in his 7th house. Oh man. Okay, so when Venus is square Saturn like this, you know, anytime, it means two things. As far as an artist, he's a very refined artist, okay? Saturn brings restriction, and even though he started fairly young, there's like this refinement to him, this where he can withhold a little bit from the people, right? Because seventh house rules relationships and other people, to be able to sort of, it's almost like with Uranus, he could bounce around his ideas in there very openly, creatively, expressively, maybe with people that he's closer to, or perhaps just when he's studying character, something like that, and he's able to really manifest it in the outside world in his 10th house. But, you know, Saturn squaring Venus here really chips away at his Venus and makes him bring out the best parts of her. Now, as far as relationships go, you don't, when you have any Saturn, I've seen it with soft contacts too. You know, I get a lot of people that are, you know, pushing 30, they're not married. And of course, this generation does marry a little later. But when you have Venus in any aspect to Saturn, like where it's actually aspecting, you know, within a 5-degree orb, even a trine or a sextile, or I've seen it even in other kind of subtle ways where they're still together, maybe a rulership or something that connects them. Venus will withhold marriage until the first Saturn return, which happens about around the age of 29 for everyone. And if you do get married before that, because my Venus is square my Saturn and I was married in my 20s, you will get divorced. But it's part of Saturn refining you. And ironically, my ex was a Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So, I mean, it definitely refined me, refined my character. But see, Saturn will restrict and withhold, not just to, you know, be a mean Saturn, it's to refine you. And then when you hit that first Saturn return, he will come in and support you in a way that he hasn't before, you know, bring in that right partner, that solid, steady partner. And again, when your Saturn returns around the age of, you know, it's middle age. It is like, you know, that's when people might have their midlife crisis. The crises, depending on when how Saturn is aspected. But with Venus and Saturn, it gets better with age. It's like a fine wine. It gets better with time. But in a square, it's always going to be more challenging. Now, because Johnny's had Venus square Saturn his whole life, he's had time to refine this, to work with Saturn. You know, he's, I think, pushing his second Saturn return or right around there. I didn't look it up. So he's probably definitely not going to be dealing with any more chaotic relationships the rest of his life, if he can even open up to anyone. But the interesting thing is that her Venus is square his Saturn as well. So I had said that in the first video, and this is where she could have sort of friend zoned him or been unsure about him, felt like he was a little restrictive, sort of a fatherly figure. I said we need Saturn in a relationship to hold two people together in the first video. And here I had said that, you know, I don't think that they have too much, because too much can be burdensome and too heavy for people. You know, after a while he can start to corrode because it's too much Saturn. But now that I look at it again, you know, Venus square Saturn, Saturn square Pluto here, I do feel like, you know, even though they have some nice Saturn contacts, that this Saturn energy was a little too heavy here. So, you know, I went into this a little more in the first video, Venus square Saturn. Now, this didn't make or break them. This could have been something that, you know, contributed to them breaking up in that 6 to 10 year gap. But they have Mars square Jupiter, which we talked about in the first video. They shouldn't have ever been together. The Mars square Jupiter, to me, it's not written in the stars. I see over and over and over it plays out the same way. And as I said before, because of their vast resources and because their Venuses are conjunct, which Venus is resources, in Taurus, where, you know, the resources flourish, Taurus rules the house of money, they were able to put a lot of wasted energy into Mars square Jupiter trying to make this work, trying to drag out that initial and, you know, really embrace this Venus conjunct Venus love and understanding. But it just wasn't meant to be. And, you know, if they had gone to an astrologist when things first started getting rocky, or one like me, they would know. They probably would have got mad at me because they were so hell-bent on making it work. But okay, anyways, there was two more that I didn't get to get into in the last video, and it was what finally broke them. Since I do think since they were able to overcome Mars square Jupiter for so long, this is where a lot of the battles were coming from. But you know, it's not one like Mars conjunct Pluto, where we see the two being very toxic, and then everyone around them is like, why are you two still together? And they're inseparable. There's this unbreakable bond. And there's almost can be like a Stockholm syndrome. And we were talking in the first video about how Johnny has Mars conjunct Pluto in his second house. But I feel like that's very unique to him. It may be aspecting her somehow, but without her birth time and stuff, I'm not going to dig too deep into it right now. If I have any epiphanies, I'll make a part 3. But what I really want to get into is what ultimately broke them, since they were able to overcome Mars square Jupiter, even though they were living in the chaos of that. And really trying to embrace this Venus conjunct Venus, is what ultimately destroyed them is Saturn square Pluto. Okay, so with Saturn square Pluto, this is a divorce aspect. People can get married with it. Remember when I said, well, if you watched the first video, Mars square Jupiter, I've never seen any couple get married with it. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I've probably seen at least 1,000 of these relationships now with Mars square Jupiter. It's usually the same 2 stories. So this, I give my clients the example all the time when they come to me. My boyfriend broke up with me. Do you think he'll come back? And I look and I'm like, how long have you guys been dating? And they're like 6 months. And I'm like, okay, but when did it really start to fall apart? You know, after 2 to 4 months? Yeah, I mean, he's been difficult. Okay, you two have Mars square Jupiter. You know, you can keep trying to make this work, but just know that the odds are very much against you, basically. And so, you know, that's 2 to 4 months. But with Saturn square Pluto, people can get married. I often see this with divorces. So if someone comes to me and says, you know, I'm having a custody battle and, you know, I need to know, you know, like they're divorced, they're over it. After it's done and they're divorced, they're over each other, you know. They try to destroy each other in the divorce, though. I do see that a lot. It is quite a battle. Saturn square Pluto. Okay, and they can, if they have children or something, they can be friends, you know, once the dust settles. They can be civil, but they won't think of each other the way that they did before, as romantically. So this whole divorce, right, and this big legal thing going on, I think a lot of it was stirred up by Mars square Jupiter. A lot of the BS, when we're listening to those videotapes, and I had gotten into this in the last video towards the end, when we're listening to those videotapes and she's like, but you leave and I want you to stay, and then he's like, you know, you're always out with your friends. I don't know if those were their exact words, but I could feel that tension where you can't pin someone down. Even if you get married and live together with Mars square Jupiter, you cannot pin the other one down, and as soon as you do, you'll be the one leaving. And I definitely felt that sort of tug of war with them, which is what stirred up all of this chaos and drama. But when it comes to the nasty, mean divorce, it's Saturn square Pluto. So if you're dating someone and you have this, I would recommend not marrying them and mixing up your resources too much, because one of you at the end of the day is going to lose. Let me just see really quick with Saturn square Pluto what it says in the software, and then I think I touched on most of it. We might go into the North Nodes and Lilith for a moment, but yeah, see here, what does it, sometimes I like to just reference the software too. I thought it had a description. Yeah, okay. Challenging aspect. The relationship can be difficult or destructive at times. Avoid pushing one another. You know, I love how this is so simplified. It can be difficult or destructive at times. This is like the divorce of divorces. This is the difficult divorce. Okay, Saturn square Pluto. A lot of drama when it comes to this divorce, and it is a divorce, and this gives a shelf life of 5 to 6 years. So I said, you know, they had some things working for them for 10 to 20. They had, you know, Mars square Jupiter usually will overpower all the other positives and make them divorce, or not even get married, you know, be separated within a few months. But when we have Saturn square Pluto here, this is 5 to 6 years. So I think this is what I was saying in the first video that I didn't get to, is I definitely think that Saturn square Pluto is what finally did them in after approximately 5 years. Because Saturn is the father of time, and so you won't feel him necessarily in the beginning of a relationship. So when he really started to take his hold here, and this was the other thing I wanted to get into with Saturn square Pluto, when Saturn really starts to take his hold over time Saturn gets stronger. That's why it makes people feel duty and obligation to a relationship. That's why when a couple has no Saturn, they may really want to be together, but they just won't feel that duty or obligation, or that, for better or worse, to work through the hard times. And so this actually helped them probably work through, like, be able to have the capacity to work through the Mars square Jupiter stuff that also along with the extreme resources with Venus conjunct Venus. But when it comes to Saturn square Pluto, Saturn and Pluto were father and son, and they fought for the underworld. So they're both lords of the underworld. They're very vicious. I mean, if you have Saturn and Pluto in your corner, all the better to you, you know. This is why you don't want to mess with a Capricorn that's ruled by Saturn, or a Scorpio that's ruled by Pluto. You know, they're probably the last people that you want as enemies, but they're definitely great friends. But Saturn and Pluto in themselves do not get along, okay? So like Mars and Jupiter, they get along normally if they're not in a square. So this creates great passion that two people don't want to let go of. But with Saturn and Pluto, they don't usually get along at all. They hate each other. They were ready to kill each other for the underworld. And I don't even remember all of the Greek mythology to that story right now. I should have refreshed, but I heard it by word of mouth. So it's just one that I really like. But with this one, yeah, Saturn and Pluto already hate each other, so to have each other in a square, they will totally destroy each other in divorce court is basically what will happen here. Sorry, I had to take a moment there. Throat's getting a little dry. All right, so this pretty much was the basis of what I wanted to show you, was their Venus conjunct Venus, how their suns and moons get along. You know, this Mars square Jupiter, and that's why I chose them first, is because Mars square Jupiter, I've never seen any couple get married with it aside from these two. And so that is why I always tell my clients, like, the only couple I've seen get married with this is Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So if you want to go ahead and look them up and see, you know, how that's going to go for you if you actually get this person, you know, as much as the heartache can be of this potential that we feel is lost normally with Mars square Jupiter right in the very beginning, they definitely, if they see that example, it helps them feel a little better, I believe. I wish that I wasn't so grainy on here. I'll figure it out. I'll get the other camera. Okay, so let's just really quickly go over their Liliths and their North nodes, because North node is the life path, right? And then we saw that she was affecting his Lilith in his chart. So I just want to see if I had any. Let's see if his Lilith is involved here. Back to this chart where he's first. Okay, so not only is his Lilith opposite her Venus, it's opposite her sun. So she really shined a light with his Lilith being in his 4th house. That's a very private sector of his life, with the 10th house being in opposition to that. Her sun is shining a light now on his Lilith. Anything dark about him, not saying like, Lilith doesn't actually mean like he embodies these qualities, but this is, you know, your infamy can be sort of your bad reputation as well, and she's shining a light on that. This is what brought him infamy, being with her. And then with Lilith sextile Neptune here, there was a little bit of a fog, and that was the other thing that got muted out of the last video, so I'm glad I went in to look at their Liliths. Now, as far as her Lilith, oh yeah, his Mars is square her Lilith, and I tell you guys, anytime we see Mars square somebody else's planet or asteroid, it's a rough time, okay? So he definitely could have, I don't know, stirred up a sense of rebellion in her, or even possibly been slightly antagonistic. Maybe this is an example, and this may or may not be true, but this is just what I think of to kind of illustrate this for you. Is we all know that like she's kind of bisexual and had a lesbian lover before and all of this, who she had some, you know, public things with too. You know, his Mars could have come in and, you know, been even jealous of, you know, her relationships with women, or, you know, could have. Mars is more a planet of actions, so I don't feel like it's just something that Mars would have come up against. This is his masculine nature as well, so there could have been a little bit of conflict, and that would be not exactly how it played out, but with her maybe being too independent, or it can even be she doesn't dress this way, but like say a woman like dressed very promiscuously, Mars might be like maybe jealous. It depends if Pluto's involved. But okay, so here we have his moon is with her Neptune. So this is where you hear in the videos where they're, you know, using drugs and they're, you know, always messed up, and but at the same time, even if they're sober, they're going to intoxicate each other here. This is a very, very high connection, very spiritual connection. This is soulmate right here. This with their Venus conjunct Venus, if they didn't have Mars square Jupiter and Saturn square Pluto, like these are definitely ideal aspects to have in love. But with Neptune, you know, the moon, Johnny could have been a little disillusioned. He could have thought that, you know, her moon kind of, he could have sensed that her moon met his in Capricorn, and then he gets to know her moon in Libra, and it's not the way it seemed. Neptune can be, you know, not the way things seem. And then with her Mars being on his moon here, Mars can come off, this is a little bit wider of an orb, like 5 degrees, but Mars on somebody's moon, you know, if it's the woman's moon, which it's not, it's Johnny's moon here, it can cause the man to really want to impregnate the woman, because Mars is like the most masculine, and the moon is very much, the moon is like very feminine, motherly energy. So, but when we have it flipped with the woman's Mars, this is a very aggressive placement. This is like when we have, you know, the woman's Mars conjunct the man's Venus. And it's a strong understanding, but it's just, she would have come off very aggressively towards him. He would have been very sensitive towards her here. And then with Neptune there, he may not have seen that at first. There was a fog, but this is also where they are just very intoxicated around each other. Plus add the Venus-Venus conjunction. These are very strong, intoxicating aspects. And then you add the Neptune fog here. You know, this is where they were getting into some, you know, drug usage here in a very casual way. I'm not passing judgment, but that's where that came from. So the one last thing we'll look at really quickly is their north nodes. I believe her north node is in Gemini. I think I have, let's see if it says it here, because we don't have her birth time. Just check the live chat really quick to see if it's working. It says it's unavailable. I guess I didn't do it right. Okay. Okay. So, go back really quick. The one last thing I want to check out is their north nodes here. Let's see. Should say her north node, but I think it's still in this chart. So we go down, and the part of the reason I'm doing this, you guys, again, if you didn't see the first video, is so you can see how I go over a synastry chart and evaluate, you know, a couple's, how it's going to play out for them. And whether I look at it ahead of time or afterwards, normally it's afterwards, it lines up. So it is something you might want to learn, you know, go to Cafe Astrology, free compatibility. You don't need the birth times. You can run them through here, and you can go to my twin flame soulmate aspects video, and you can go to the Are You Wasting Your Time video, and you can see what the deal breakers are. I'm definitely going to have to add Saturn square Pluto, because I don't think it was in the first Are You Wasting Your Time video. It's a divorce aspect, so I might do a divorce aspects video, and I might do like a red flags video, which would be something like Venus square Mars, or square Saturn. That would be a red flag. That would be like, you might be able to make this through it, but it depends on the other aspects heavily. So, okay, north, I know they have some north node stuff going on here. We have his Uranus is trine her north node. Well, that's it. I think there might be something else when you actually dig into the charts, but you know, that's just real electric. He brought, you know, Uranus is also 11th house. It can also indicate fame, Aquarius. So he helped her destiny path unfold here with some of his in his ingenuity. He definitely brought a lot of social connections and things like that to her life. Not necessarily fame, but could be with Aquarius. So then there's the one last thing I wanted to go over in Johnny's chart, and it was because this had popped up when I remembered to do. Actually, I think it popped up when my last video left, but his Saturn is in his 7th house, and it's squaring his Venus. So this shows, you know, that I think he like never really got married to the first couple women he was with, and like I told you guys, one of these days I might go through those other relationships to kind of compare. But with his Saturn in Aquarius in the 7th house, these one astrologers I was watching were saying like Saturn in the 7th house could really cut off relationships or restrict them, but I don't think so. I think it brings more of a serious tone. Everything needs to be written in stone. He might need to have some control over, you know, this is legal partnerships, 7th house, so marriage, business partnerships, things like that. So with Saturn there, you know, one could get one over on him. And if you watched the first video, I said I almost feel bad for him as Saturn with her Venus squaring his Saturn, because where his natal Venus squaring his own Saturn refines him, her Venus squaring his Saturn, it's like the one planet that could sort of play Saturn the fool a little bit or break Saturn's heart a little bit, because Saturn is cold as ice. So Saturn is a hard one to hurt, but Venus, with her Venus square his Saturn, I definitely think that was going on a little bit here. And at first, the energy might have felt comfortable to him because his moon is in Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. But after a while, it could have been, you know, hit him in a way that no one else did before. So I definitely don't think these two are meant to be. I think that, you know, if I had known about Mars square Jupiter back in the day and made this video, who knows, you know, but yeah, I definitely see the rewards. There were definitely rewards here. There's reasons that they work together, but with Mars square Jupiter, it's not written in the stars, and with Pluto square Saturn, it was meant to be a divorce even after they made it through that. So hopefully I'll be able to figure out the bit rate issues with, you know, my display here. You see, you can't even see me, but yeah, I think this about covers it. So if you made it through, even with all this graininess, you can go ahead and like and subscribe so you can see when I come out with the next celebrity synastry video. I also do the monthly tarot readings for each astrology sign, and I'm working on the big 144 series where I'm going through all the sun, moon, and rising signs. So definitely check those out. And then like the Are You Wasting Your Time video, soulmate twin flame video, I'm definitely going to be coming out with part 2s of those, and some red flag aspect videos, things like that. So yeah, I would love your support. I have a donation button in the bottom until I hit, you know, monetization, so I can keep bringing you the videos. I also do personal readings. I work for like 3 or 4 psychic sites, so you can get a personal reading from me in the link below as well. And if you have any suggestions for the next celebrity synastry video, I would love to hear them. Definitely drop them in the comments below. And if you are looking for a place to find mini psychics to help you, there's a new collective. I'm going to go ahead and run the ad now. If you watched part 1, you saw the ad for they're looking for advisors. I'm working with them, Psychics Gold, and they definitely need more advisors on the platform because they're going to launch a huge advertising campaign, and there's going to be a lot of new people coming in. So there definitely needs to be guides there to help them out. So we're trying to gather everyone together there. So if you watch the first video, you can see that ad, and I'll put the link for the psychic application in the description, and I'll also put the link to go ahead and sign up to Psychics Gold so you can find your personal spiritual advisor. Or if you want to start with me, the link to my Psychics Gold account, you know, profile is below as well for personal readings. So I'll go ahead and play this, and I'll wish you a happy holidays, Merry Christmas to those of you who celebrate, a happy winter Easter equinox, winter solstice, you know, big things coming with that, you guys. So sending you lots of love, blessings, and light. Thank you if you made it this far.